Today we're going to start to talk about the study of life, an introduction to biology. Biology is the study of life or living things. This is a field that encompasses many different areas in science, including botany, microbiology, zoology, anatomy, ecology, genetics, and microbiology. During the course of the year, we will touch on many of these different areas as we learn about biology. When we talk about the study of life, we need to start by discussing about how people first thought that life began. In 1668, people believed that life arose from non-living things. They got this from looking at pieces of rotten meat where maggots would come out of, and then they would turn into flies. Spontaneous generation is the theory that living things arose from non-living things. Franco Redi is an Italian doctor that proposed a new theory. He is the one who came up with something opposed to spontaneous generation. He suggested that the flies had actually laid their eggs on the rotting meat, and they were just too small to see until they actually hatched into the maggots. Therefore, they did not arise from the non-living meat. There was actually a living thing that had deposited its eggs. There is a brief video that I would like you to go and watch on Redi's experiment. I have the link listed in the notes here. It will also be attached to your assignment in Teams so that you can click and go directly to that video. After watching that video, you should know that he ran a controlled experiment. Remember, a controlled experiment is where we are only changing one variable at a time. In one jar containing the meat, it was uncovered, and another jar containing the meat was covered. The flies appeared only on the meat in which the uncovered jar was there. He concluded that the maggots only formed when the flies came in contact with the meat and would have laid their eggs. Scientists did not immediately believe his results, and they thought that the vital force that caused life was coming from the air. To prove them wrong, he did his experiment again. So he still had his same hypothesis, and in order to conduct his experiment this time, he redesigned his experiment, and instead of covering and sealing the jar with a cork lid, he covered it with gauze. So this allowed the air to flow in and out, but it did not allow the flies to come in. So the maggots did not grow on the meat because they were not able to get into the meat to lay their eggs. Remember when we talked about the scientific method, we talked that things should be able to be replicated. So your results should be able to be repeated. If you do an experiment, you should be able to have somebody else do it and repeat the experiment and get the same results. Other scientists built on his work and did more experiments to help confirm what Redi's experiment brought to light. Redi's experiment led to a new theory that living things come from other living things. This theory is called biogenesis. Other scientists created experiments in order to try to disprove Redi's results. One scientist that conducted experiments to try to validate Redi's results was Louis Pasteur. He had a very famous experiment, and his experiments resulted in the process called pasteurization. You are going to now watch a short video on Pasteur's experiments. The link is in the assignment on Teams. Pasteur's experiment disproved the theory that air was a vital force that gave rise to organisms spontaneously. So what this means is he was able to prove that air was not what made the life come from the rotten meat. Important things you need to remember when we're using these terms. There is a difference between a scientific theory and a hypothesis. There is also a difference between how you use the word theory in science and how you use the word theory in everyday life. A scientific theory is a hypothesis that has been tested and tested again, and there is a bunch of evidence that supports that hypothesis. It's been tested, it's been published, and it's been tested again. A scientific law is a natural phenomenon that is supported by the data. Generally, when we talk about our scientific laws, they are things that don't change, like the law of gravity. To summarize, even though many scientists believed in the theory of spontaneous generation, two scientists, Reddy and Pasteur, were able to disprove this theory, and they were able to show that living things come from other living things, and that is the theory called biogenesis.